Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into uh, a core challenge for anyone trying to share knowledge effectively: preparation. We've distilled insights from quite a few sources, all focused on practical planning, but also the mechanics of how we actually learn. This isn't just teaching 101, it's more about the cognitive science behind it all. And what we found really at the heart of it is this fascinating paradox. The main theme seems to be that detailed preparation. It doesn't lock you in. Actually, it gives you this profound freedom. It's like if you really know your stuff, you suddenly have the confidence to go completely off script. Okay, let's unpack this.
That's exactly right. We're looking at the why behind good planning.
Hmm.
Moving past just the checklist of lesson objectives and asking, what's the psychological foundation that a solid plan provides? And our sources, researchers like Thompson, Spenceley, Tinney, they are absolutely clear on this first point. The evidence really shows that the most successful teachers, the ones who keep things moving and engaging, they're the ones who are incredibly well prepared.
Okay, why though?
Well, because that detailed prep, it acts like a safety net. And that gives them what the research calls permission to be spontaneous. So when those really important teachable moments come up, they can actually stop, pivot, explore without that fear of completely losing the thread.
Hang on, isn't that a bit counterintuitive? I mean, if I've planned out every single minute, wouldn't that make me less flexible? Wouldn't I just want to snap back to the plan I worked so hard on?
Yeah, that's a fair question. But I think you might be mixing up rigidity with having a solid foundation. A great teacher understands that positive learning impact, well, it doesn't happen by magic, right? The detailed plan is all the thinking done beforehand. It makes sure everything's considered, not just the content, but also, crucially, the listener's motivation, their curiosity. So the plan is like having a really good GPS. It lets you confidently take that interesting side road because you know you can always get back on track. Think about it like this. A good plan has to cover, sort of, three main areas. First, obviously, knowledge construction, the logical flow of ideas. Second, recognizing that learning is really individual, everyone comes at it differently. And third, the social and emotional side. Things like motivation, curiosity, and what psychologists call self-efficacy, the learner's belief that they can actually succeed. If your plan hits the emotional buy-in just as much as the content, then it becomes, as the sources say, a roadmap. It's adaptable. It's not some rigid diktat or rule of law.
Okay, so planning is less about just scheduling time and more about anticipating where things might go wrong, both cognitively and emotionally.
Precisely.
Right. Let's zoom in a bit then to the micro level. The very start of, say, a lesson or presentation. Our sources keep hammering this point. First
Yeah.
impressions matter a lot. Apparently, we make judgments about the material, the speaker, everything in under a second, which is wild. But that pressure to grab attention fast, that can lead to a huge planning mistake, just overwhelming people right out of the gate.
And this takes us straight into cognitive science, specifically something called cognitive load theory, or CLT. When we plan, we absolutely have to respect the brain's limits, its finite capacity. We're talking mainly about short-term memory, or working memory. And decades of research show it's surprisingly restricted. It can only really hold about 7 things at once, give or take 2. That's Miller's famous magical number.
7 items. Well, so if you throw up a really dense slide and start talking about 5 different points.
You've blown the budget, exactly, before the listener has even processed the title.
Okay, that makes sense.
And this is where planning needs to get quite granular. See, cognitive load isn't just one thing. There's intrinsic load. That's just how hard the topic itself is. You can't really change that much. Then there's germane load. That's the good kind of load. That's the mental effort spent connecting new stuff to what you already know. That's where deep learning happens. But the big danger for planners is extraneous cognitive load. That's the bad stuff. The mental energy wasted dealing with confusing or poorly designed instruction. If your teacher talk is way too fast, or your slides are a mess, or the graphics are unnecessarily complicated, the learner's brain is just struggling with the format instead of absorbing the actual content. And that makes information much less likely to stick.
So the planner's job is basically to cut out that bad load, the extraneous stuff. Okay, that clicks. But how do we respect that magic number 7 without just, dumbing everything down?
Right. The practical solution is a technique called chunking. You group related bits of information into a single meaningful unit. The brain then treats that whole chunk as just one item. It effectively expands your short-term memory capacity.
Oh, okay. Like with phone numbers, we group the digits.
Exactly like phone numbers. Or the classic example is using mnemonics, like remembering the colors of the rainbow. Instead of trying to hold 7 distinct colors in your head, you learn a phrase like, Richard of York gave battle in vain. That whole phrase, that chunk, takes up maybe one slot in working memory, but it unlocks all 7 colors. It's a really elegant workaround for the brain's limits.
That's clever. So from respecting the brain's hard limits, the next logical step seems to be respecting individual differences between brains. For years, many teachers and trainers tried to tailor things based on supposed dominant learning styles, the visual, auditory, kinesthetic thing, VAK. But the sources we looked at are pretty unanimous. The whole idea that you need to cater to one fixed learning style. It's been largely debunked by modern research. It just doesn't really hold water.
Absolutely. And the aha moment here for you listening is that while these rigid styles are a myth, recognizing that people do have preferences, that's still valuable. So if someone prefers visuals, sure, give them diagrams. But don't assume they can't learn from listening or reading.
Right. It's not an inability, just a preference.
Exactly. The real progress in education now is towards something called adaptive teaching. And this is quite different from standard differentiation. Differentiation usually means planning for different achievement levels, like giving harder tasks to faster learners. Adaptive teaching is deeper than that. It's about spotting and overcoming very specific individual barriers. These could be obvious physical challenges, or they might be hidden social or intellectual hurdles. The goal is helping that specific learner find their path to reach their potential.
That's a really important distinction. Differentiation adjusts the goal, or maybe the pace. Adaptation adjusts the path because something is actually blocking it for that person. And there was a great example in the research that showed this really well. Yeah, a teacher adapting materials for a student with a visual impairment. The adaptation wasn't like switching everything from visual to audio. Instead, they converted PowerPoint slides into simple Word documents. Why? So the student could use an optical scan reader pen.
Yes. That's perfect.
Because the pen needs clean text to convert to speech.
Exactly. The teacher adapted the tool to overcome a specific physical barrier. The core lesson content stayed the same, but access was personalized. That's true adaptive teaching. It sees the individual and finds a practical fix.
Okay, this leads us to maybe the toughest challenge. Dealing with misconceptions. We've all seen it, right? Smart people just clinging to wrong ideas, even when you show them evidence. Why is it so hard to correct misinformation? Why do facts sometimes lose out to feelings?
Yeah, this is where we had a psychological wall called belief perseverance. Research shows we have this deep-seated, often subconscious drive to ignore or actively discredit information that clashes with our existing, sometimes called naive, understanding of how things work. It's just mentally easier to stick with what we already think we know.
It's comfortable.
It's comfortable, exactly. And the historical examples are really striking. Think back to Leon Festinger's famous work on cognitive dissonance. He studied this religious group that predicted a huge flood on a specific date. The day came, the day went. Not a drop of rain. Now, logically, you'd expect them to question their leader, maybe disband.
Right.
But they didn't. They actually became more devoted. They found a way to reinterpret the events to fit their beliefs, like their faith had saved the world. They doubled down.
Wow. So the need to protect their existing belief was stronger than the evidence right in front of them. How on earth do we, as educators or communicators, break through that kind of mental fortress?
Well, that example perfectly shows the battle between assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation is easy fitting new info into your existing mental boxes. Accommodation is hard, sometimes painful. It means realizing your existing box is wrong, and you have to fundamentally restructure your thinking. Belief perseverance is basically the brain fighting tooth and nail to avoid accommodation.
So how do we encourage that harder path, accommodation?
The sources suggest being proactive. First, tackle common misconceptions head-on, right at the beginning. Name them, discuss why they seem plausible but are wrong. That sort of inoculates people. Second, maybe less direct instruction, less just telling. Use things like the Socratic method, asking probing questions, challenging assumptions, making the learner bump up against the flaws in their own thinking. That makes the shift, the accommodation, feel less like an external attack and more like a personal discovery.
Makes sense. Let them figure it out themselves. Guided.
Right. And a third practical tool is quizzing, but not just after learning. Quizzing before you teach a topic can be really powerful.
Pre-quizzing. Why?
It forces learners to confront what they think they know, activating those naive theories. It makes them aware of their assumptions so they're more receptive when those assumptions are challenged by the new information.
Okay, so we've covered planning, starting well, managing load, adapting, tackling beliefs. But we can't forget the end, the finish line. And we all know the classic mistake, right? The last 2 minutes, papers rustling, a quick, any questions. It's not really a conclusion. It's just stopping because the bell rang.
Definitely. The conclusion, often called the plenary, needs to be planned as a vital part of the whole thing. It's not an afterthought. It's a summary, yes, but also an evaluation. And critically, it's a bridge to the next step in learning. The researcher John Hattie puts it nicely. He says the plenary lets teachers review the lesson and the learning through their learners' eyes. It's your final best chance to see what actually landed.
Through their eyes,
Yeah.
not just what you think you taught.
Precisely. And you need to check for deep learning, not just surface recall. Asking, what were the 3 key terms, gets you surface answers. The plenary needs to probe understanding and application. It's where you figure out which learners have arrived safely at the learning destination, as one source put it, and maybe who got lost along the way and needs a rescue mission planned for next time. If you rush this, you lose invaluable data for your next plan.
Right. It closes the loop. So what does this all mean? When we boil it down, it seems the deep dive confirms that structure really does breed flexibility. Planning in detail gives you that permission for spontaneity. We've got to respect the brain's magic number 7, chunking info carefully to cut extraneous load. We need to move past mythical learning styles and truly adapt to individual barriers. We have to actively fight belief perseverance, encouraging that harder path of accommodation. And finally, that plenary. It's not just a wrap-up. It's a critical bridge, making learning a continuous journey.
Well said. And if you connect this back to the bigger picture, knowledge consumption in general, the sources really reinforce that true education isn't just about giving people facts. It's transformative when it sparks curiosity and actively, consistently challenges how we think. That leap from just receiving information to critically grappling with it, that's real growth.
Absolutely. And building right on that idea, cognitive dissonance, challenging our own assumptions. Let's leave you with a final thought for this week. Think about your own work, whatever it is you do, managing a project, analyzing data, leading a team. Identify one core assumption, maybe a naive theory you hold, about how a particular process should work. That standard way you always do things. Now, how could you purposefully flip that assumption? Try looking at that process as if you were a skeptical outsider, a really critical reviewer. What would they question? That little exercise, that often uncomfortable moment of self-critique, that might just be the first step towards some genuine transformation in how you work. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.